Aloha, welcome to this week's video. So this week I'm going to be making a Maori Patu. So this is a club style weapon. The club is less round, it's more of a tear shape and then has bladed edges. I'm going to be using this piece of koa wood here. It's kind of a curved piece of koa, and so the first thing that I need to do is get a good center line and square up the piece. Normally when I square it up, I'll actually cut off some ends and, square it up. This time I'm not going to do that, just because the piece is going to be running that full length of that center line. And so all I really did here is I just kind of picked what looked like would be the center section of the end, and then drew my center line off of that. And then I drew some cross lines just to make sure that the piece stays relatively in line. It was a little bit thick at first, and so I had to bring it down a little bit. The patu is not normally that wide, so I wanted to make it a little bit thinner. It is a fairly basic shape. That being said, it's a pretty efficient weapon, actually, because of the edges that get produced on the side. When used as an impact weapon, it just does a lot of damage, has a lot of force behind it. I'm kind of being a little lazy with my bandsaw. I still have my resaw blade on. I really need to swap that out with my 1/4-inch blade. But it takes, a good 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes to swap it out. And so because it's a basic shape, I'm able to do so with the resaw blade. I just have to do a ton of cuts. And for those inside sections, I do a bunch of relief cuts. And then from there, I can cut out the rest of the section with here. That's the problem with the resaw blade. It's so thick that it doesn't do corners, it doesn't do tight cuts, and so it just takes a lot of relief cuts and a lot of smaller cuts. But for this piece, it worked. One of the things that I wanted to do with this is I did want to put some inlays in it. Now I was undecided if I wanted to use the white pearl or if I wanted to use the abalone. I decided to go with the white pearl, and I'm going to be putting that into the handle. I also kind of debated put it in the teardrop section of the piece, but I decided against it. I wanted it to keep it very basic, keep it very simple, and put all of that design and inlay into the handle. So I'm going to be shaping it out. One of the things that I do when I shape with the angle grinder, it depends on what step I'm in. For this specific piece, I am being pretty aggressive with the material that I'm removing. I really just want to keep everything in line, keep everything straight. That's why I keep looking back and forth at the edges. But then once I get it to a certain point, I'm a lot more careful with it, which is what you're seeing here. So I'm applying very little pressure to the piece. Not even the weight of the angle grinder. And the reason why is because I don't want to gouge it, and I also don't want to leave too deep of scratches into the piece. Obviously, the deeper the scratch, the more you have to sand down, and I want to make sure that I keep enough material that it still stays a good thickness all the way across. I'm going to put in a little bit of design work here on the handle. This kind of matches traditional patus that you see. They usually have, at a minimum, they'll have design work. Usually it's on the opposite end, but I kind of wanted to put it towards the handle so it'd be almost like grip. So it gives you something to hold on to as you're swinging the patu. Swinging is probably the wrong word for that, but you kind of get the idea. I'm using my angle grinder just for this one section. Those other lines I'm going to be cutting in probably either with my metal file or a rasp or my Dremel. I haven't really decided up to this point. I'm just doing that first section with the angle grinder because the angle of that edge kind of fits the angle grinder perfectly. I'm going to be sanding this piece down to probably 800. Once I start sanding, that's when I bring out the towel. So I have a towel. It doesn't have to be a towel, just any cloth that I put down, and I do that to keep any pieces of wood that are on the table from gouging into the koa wood. Koa wood is a hard wood, but I've got small pieces of wood from shaping and from sanding and from grinding, and so I I've just learned to do this. It just helps keep it a lot cleaner. One of the things that I do while sanding, though, and you may or may not have noticed, because of the sped up footage, it's hard to tell, but I do a combination of patterns when I sand. Sometimes I sand in circular motions, other times I sand straight up and down. It kind of depends on the step of the phase I'm in and what I'm doing. I've noticed that the circular motions make it a lot easier to smooth out edges, and the up and down takes a lot of material out, but it'll leave some edging on those up and down. And so you do a mixture of the both and you get a very clean edge. I decided to use my Dremel with, I think this is a 1/4 inch tungsten carbide bit. I'm pulling the bit across the wood. This helps keep a straight line, especially since those lines are really close to each other. I need to not have them skip across. And then once I have that roughed in, I'm going to go ahead and sand that down. I am going to end up using some sandpaper on the grooves as well. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and prep the handle and get it ready for the cutout. So this piece will have a lanyard. I'm going to probably have a 4 or 5 ply twisted lanyard. But in order to get that in, I need to cut a center hole into the handle. The center hole I want to make sure is a line on both sides. And so a trick that I learned a while ago is I first tap a small hole with like a 1/8 inch bit, and this gives me a center hole for both sides. I don't have to measure out both sides. The other reason why I do that is these bits here that I use, they work really well. The only thing I'm not good at is they kind of walk a little bit. If I had a drill press, it probably wouldn't, but because I'm doing it by hand, it tends to walk a little bit, and so I drill from both sides. And what that does is, if it does walk, it's okay, because when you finally connect the two pieces, you'll make up for any small differences that you had there. And it actually did. It did walk a little bit, but because I was going at it from both sides, they met up in the middle, and it worked out perfect. Just a trick that I learned to tap those larger holes. Last time I tried doing it without that, it walked quite a bit on me, and I didn't like it at all. So I'm going to be cleaning up these grooves, and then once I get these cleaned up a little bit more, I'm going to probably sand it down to 220, maybe even 320, before I put in these. And so I have the first step in getting the pearl inlays ready is a long time ago I made a couple templates. These are just circular templates. Depending on the inlay, I'll either put a circle in or a triangle or some other design. Kind of depends on what I'm working on. For this piece, I wanted to use a circle. I had a pre-cut circle that I'd made a long time ago, so I'm just taping that with some painter's tape to another piece so that I can trace it. Once I have it fully traced, I'll just take it to my grind wheel and grind that down. I do have to take it slow. I forgot to move my camera, so you didn't get to see me grinding it down. You really can't see anything, so it's really not much to look at. Once I have that ground down, the size of that matches perfectly with this bit that I have here. Now it is hand ground down, and so I drill the hole, and I still have to kind of smooth it out and make sure that the circle there is going to fit well. But once I get to that point, I'm good. I'm doing the same thing that I did with the handle, where I'm using this first as a center hole. This is being done here not because I'm going to go all the way through with the inlay, but so that the inlays are in the exact same location on both sides. So this will give me a good center punch. Now I'm taking this really slow, and I do this because I don't want it to go too deep into the wood. If it's not deep enough, I have to sand down a lot of the pearl, which is kind of a challenge because it's a lot harder than the wood, so it doesn't sand at the same rate that the wood does. If it's too deep, then I have to remove more material from the koa, and I can make the handle too thin. And so the goal is to make it as close as possible. It's not going to be perfect because the handle's round or rounded, but it's going to be as close as I can get it so that I don't have to remove as much material. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now, one thing that you'll notice here is, and this is a trick I learned quite a while ago, is that center punch also makes it really easy to pop the inlay back out. Now, I do want to be careful. I don't want to break the inlay, but it's a nice little trick to do both sides so that I can pop one side out and get the other side and put that in. That side wasn't quite deep enough, so I needed to make just a little bit of adjustment there, and then I can go ahead and fit the other side in. I got that one almost perfect the first time, but I still needed to make a little bit of adjustment to it. I'm actually just going to be using super glue. Sometimes I'll use epoxy, sometimes I'll use something else. In this case, I'm using super glue just because it's already a tight fit, and so I'm not too concerned with it coming out. And then also, once I oil it, the oil will expand the wood as well, which will make that fit even tighter. And so the super glue will be plenty to hold that into place. Now that I've got that set, I'm going to go ahead and finish sanding this piece. Again, I'm going to sand it all the way down to 800. The disc sanders only go down to 320, or at least the ones that I have. There might be others that go down further. Unfortunately, I don't have any of those. And so once I get down to the 800 grit, I'll be sanding that by hand, which isn't a big deal. I do still enjoy sanding by hand, even though I use a disc sander for most things. One thing that you'll notice though with this 3M 800 grit paper, it does cut really good. It does a good job sanding. The only problem is that it gums up, and so that's why I'm ripping it into smaller chunks, is because it gums up this section really fast, and so that way I don't waste more of the paper. I use it until it's ready. So here is the oiling. Look at that. So one of my favorite things about coal wood is how different each piece is from the next. I guess you could say that about any wood, because it's a natural material. No two pieces are exactly the same, but I just love how coal wood looks. The beautiful sheen, the golden colors, and then the tung oil works just amazing at bringing out that natural color. And I love the micro curl. So this piece does have heavy curl, but it's not a thick bands of curls. These tiny little micro curls. It just looks awesome. I absolutely loved it. And then I really loved the offset between the pearl and the handle. That looked great. So the last step that I have here is I'm going to be putting in the lanyard. I forgot to record on that, but that's okay because you'll see it here in just a minute. I'm almost finished with the piece. But looking over that inside of my shop lighting, it looks absolutely beautiful. And it fits really well in my hand. This is for a customer, so hopefully it fits well in their hand as well. That's always one of the risks. So here's the finished piece out in the natural light. You can really see the curl. I just love the simplicity of this piece. It doesn't have a lot of complex designs. It's just the beautiful wood and the teardrop design. If you like the video, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe. It really helps out a lot. I appreciate everyone's support. If you have any questions or suggestions or anything else you'd like to see, please let me know in the comments below. I really enjoy all the comments that I get about ideas for future videos, so that's a ton of fun and I greatly appreciate it. Again, mahalo for watching, and I'll see you next time. Aloha.